President Cyril Ramaphosa also saying that the African Continental Free Trade Area is a key mechanism to unlock further trade opportunities between Nigeria and South Africa. He was meeting with his Nigerian counterpart, Bola Tinubu. And joining us now is SABC News reporter Abra Barbier, who was watching that South Africa-Nigeria Binational Commission for us and joins us for the very latest. Abra, good afternoon to you and thank you so much for your time. South Africa strengthen their long-standing ties as well as address challenges hindering investment as well as trade.
Bongiwe, thank you very much. Yes, there were lots of general statements made around the AU, the continent, strengthening Africa's position globally. But I think what it came down to, what today's meeting actually came down to, is the strategic partnership between Africa's two powerhouses, South Africa and Nigeria, of course. And while President Cyril Ramaphosa acknowledged that, yes, investment's been good, he says he wants to see more Nigerian products on our shelves. The way he spoke, he said that South Africa is doing well in terms of its investment in Nigeria. But he says South Africa is hoping to attract more Nigerian businesses and investments here. And to ease the flow of doing business between the two countries, he said that Nigerian tourists now no longer need to submit their passport when traveling to the country or when applying for a visa. And then the other ease of business proposal he made was that, not a proposal, it is going to happen, was that a 5-year multi-entry visa will be issued to qualifying Nigerian business people who want to do business here in South Africa. So those are two major points that came out of today's meeting. So over the last 30 years, various memorandum of understanding were signed between the two countries. And what this meeting entails basically is to look back at what has been discussed, what's been put on the table, and what is yet to be implemented. And then, of course, with what was discussed today, that too will be taken forward. And hopefully the two countries will be able to implement what came out of today's meeting as well. Bongiwe?
And as you say, because one of the key things here now becomes monitoring, which he also touched on, to say that it's going to be quite important to ensure that, in fact, this does happen so that they ensure that there's implementation, as you say.
Yes, this is what I discussed with the South African ambassador to Nigeria. He actually explained to us the whole process of how they first need to look back at what was discussed at the 2021 Binational Commission, which was held in Abuja. What came out of that meeting and what have they put in place? And then, of course, same going forward. And we know in South Africa, implementation is a big issue across government departments. So yes, they will, the ministers, the various ministers, the counterparts will be coordinating because they also met in the run-up to today's meeting, the ministers. Like yesterday we had the foreign affairs ministers meet, international relations ministers meeting, discussing matters affecting their portfolio. So ministers will be kept to account and will obviously, between them and their counterparts, be discussing how they will be managing the implementation and all these beautiful discussions and all these beautiful ideas that have been put on the table. One other thing that stood out for me yesterday, the Nigerian Foreign Affairs Minister mentioned that they were preparing an MOU around the issue of Nigerian geologists and wanting to capitalize on Nigerian professionals in the mining sector. And then today, again, the Nigerian president said that he proposes that South Africa and Nigeria lead the way in forming a committee, an African committee, which will see a clampdown of illegal mining on the continent. That really stood out for me as well because he spoke about outside external force in these illegal mines in the various African countries. He says it leads to conflict, it leads to strife, and of course the natural resources meant for those who should benefit, it's not going to the right communities, and that is going to be one to look out for as well. He said two countries should lead this, but he is calling for it to be a continent-wide program going forward.
And it certainly speaks to a lot of concern that has been raised by some to say that this is an issue that the continent needs to deal with, not just individual countries, especially given how this illegal mining operation is in fact working. But also, Abra, this is coming at a time when South Africa has also now assumed the presidency of the G20, and that as well also being touched on even by the Nigerian president as he congratulated South Africa.
Yes, I actually didn't hear much about that because obviously our president discussed that earlier in the day. The Nigerian president congratulated President Cyril Ramaphosa and offered Nigeria's constant support and companionship and camaraderie, he says, as they have been doing over the last 30 years.
And certainly, Abra, one to watch, as you say, look back at the promises that were made before and where you are now and where you are headed. So certainly a lot to talk about when it comes to this particular, the agreements that have been signed here. But thank you so much, Abra, for just wrapping that for us. That was Abra Barbier, SABC News reporter.